Thank you very much. I've got my clock, and I've set myself the challenge of taking you through almost all but 50 years of this history. My talk is really built around two aspects of Maltese identity and history. One is Malta, a holy island, a place where religion has been important, and the other is Malta as a fort. We know what Malta is, 3 islands of very small size, and I think the things that have marked Malta out in history are geology and position. Malta, a land of limestone. There really isn't much else in Malta apart from limestone, we have to say, in terms of natural resources. It's actually unusual. It's actually part of the African plate, and that makes it very distinct from the geology and the landscape of Sicily. And this dry garrigue landscape is actually, in many respects, for invaders or settlers, very undesirable. What Malta also has is a position at the centre of the sea. It's a stepping stone south to north from people from Africa into Europe and east to west. And the strategic position is going to feature very heavily in its history. What geology has given to Malta, these are eroded mountaintops. And where they've been eroded very deeply, we get drowned valleys. And undoubtedly the thing that has been of great interest to many, many people has been Malta's harbours. The Grand Harbour, 2.5 miles long, and then separated by what is now Valletta, Marsamxett. These are the best deep water ports in the Mediterranean, and they are going to be of crucial significance to what happens to Malta. We know that about 5000 BC, you can see Malta from Sicily, that people came in boats and they settled on the island. And from about 4000 BC to 2500 BC, they created an absolutely unique and in some respects very mysterious megalithic culture. There are probably 30 freestanding temples in this very, very small place. These people are temple obsessives. And the rationale behind this, whether this was competitive building, we don't know. But this is unique. This seems to have been like a dream time. There seems to be no warfare, no external influence. These people just got on with spending a great deal of their available GDP in building temples. The extraordinary sickle-shaped chambers seen from the air with religious significance. These are holy places with side chapels, an inner shrine, and an outer courtyard where the people would have gathered to receive the mystery from the priests within, as we understand it. These are actually the same site, Ajagim, which has now been covered over to protect it from the elements. Characteristically are these sort of framing devices which allowed people to have a look inside to see get some glimpse of the mysteries within, altars and so on. These are very sophisticated people. They can break large stones with wooden tools and with fire. They can move 50-ton blocks. They move them on wooden platforms with sort of stone ball bearings, which are still lying around in some of the sites. It gives you a kind of a real vivid idea of what this is all about. And they decorated these in extraordinary ways with sort of punctured decoration, or with these spiral patterns, which people believe represented the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This is also a fertility goddess culture, and we get an extraordinary range of female figures. This is called the Venus of Malta, a very beautiful figure. We get these extraordinary sort of large ladies, we get women lying down, we get women giving birth, and extraordinary outsized statues of goddesses, of which only the base survives. This would have been taller than a man. And so running through this are a whole strand of different cultural and religious purposes. These are aligned according to solar and lunar calendars, so that the light would shine into particular parts of the temple at particular times of the year. And they also created extraordinary burial chambers, the hypogeum as it's called, this underground chamber, absolutely unique in the world. It's almost like a model of a temple underground. We think of these people as being very foreign to us, distant and mysterious. This is in the museum in Valletta. It's only about this tall, and it shows a man and a woman embracing. And it's a point at which we see these people closer to us, I think, that they were like us. We know that somehow this vanishes at about 2,500 BC. Nobody knows why. Probably ecological collapse, that they outreach the resources available, possibly drought, and they disappear, and they will be replaced by Bronze Age people later on. The mysteries of Maltese archaeology are fascinating and perplexing. And the other one, which is particularly interested archaeologists, and I'm sure that many of you will know this, is the mystery of these cart tracks. They may be sledge tracks, they may be wheel tracks, they may be irrigation channels running across the island in crisscross patterns, going into the water, have provided plenty of opportunity for counterfactual theories about Atlantis and so on. They may be 2,500 BC, they may be as recent as 7,000 BC, created by the Phoenicians. Malta moves into history with the Phoenicians, or in this case the Carthaginians, the first maritime power in the Mediterranean, who appreciate Malta for its harbour, and they give Malta its name, the safe haven. There are very dim echoes, possibly, of the Phoenicians in some of the traditional Maltese boats, such as the Dysa, sort of the gondola of the Grand Harbour. The shape may be derived from the Phoenicians. The Eye of Osiris may date back that far. It's kind of slightly contentious, but it's a kind of an interesting possible link. The Carthaginians lose the battle with the Romans for control of the Mediterranean, and Malta becomes an outlying Roman settlement, really pretty much disregarded. There are some remains in Malta, but they're not heavy. What is more significant, is the fact that I don't know my own slides. It's the coming of Christianity. St. Paul is shipwrecked here sometime around 60 AD. And really, if you wanted to get to the heart of Maltese identity into modern times, it has been their identification as Christians. The cult of St. Paul, venerated wherever Maltese is spread throughout the world. Extraordinary catacombs have been created in the limestone in the centre of the island. Of course, Malta has churches of all sizes, from the giant dome of Mostar through to tiny chapels, probably more churches per square mile than anywhere else in the world. So religion is central, I think, to Maltese identity, and is furiously celebrated, particularly at Easter time, but throughout the year. The Christian culture becomes mysterious and possibly disappears. Nobody quite knows, with the stepping stone of the Arabs across the sea. And for 200 years, the Mediterranean really becomes an Arab lake. The Arabs arrive, they do various things in terms of irrigation and agriculture, but the one contribution that they make is really to do with the Maltese language. For those of us who don't speak Maltese, it does look extremely weird. This is a Semitic language. You can obviously see many Italian loanwords in there, but it's one of the things, I think, which has marked the Maltese off as a special people, a people perhaps separated off from the rest of Europe, but with their own unique identity. They last 200 years, and then they're pushed out by the nasty Normans from Sicily. For another 700 years, Malta is going to be linked to Sicily, to the kingdom of the two Sicilies, and whoever rules southern Italy. There are two urban settlements, really, in that should have said Mdina in Burgu, but it doesn't. Mdina, which is the medieval capital of Sicily, and the one peninsula within what is now the Grand Harbour, Burgu, which is obviously not an Arab place name. Most of the place names are of Arab origin. Mdina, fantastic Baroque city with many more medieval buildings as well. And Burgos, the peninsula, one of the peninsulas along with Sengler, reaching into the Grand Harbour with its very narrow streets. Behind all this, and throughout the whole of this history, really, there has been a traditional rural life. These flat-topped, cubic farmhouses probably date back to the Arabs, and well into the 20th century, the traditional Maltese landscape with its dusty tracks, stone walls, and traditional patterns of agriculture has obviously been very much a part of Maltese life. Something happens to Malta, really, to take it out of its isolation in the 16th century. I have to say, if you look around Malta, there's a heck of a lot of military engineering. And really what drags it out is the contest for the Mediterranean that develops in the 16th century between the Christian Habsburgs in Spain and the Ottomans in Istanbul. A contest for the Mediterranean between Charles V and Suleiman the Magnificent. Malta, which has mysteriously moved, it seems to be showing Sicily, but never mind, we won't worry about that. It is really in the eye of the storm. It's viciously raided by Islamic pirates. It becomes a scourge by Barbary pirates of North Africa. And in the 1530s, Charles V gives Malta, or persuades the Knights of St. John, the crusading order, to settle on Malta. I think there's a major heritage industry in Malta in military and historical reenactments. These people appear several times in this show. They take over the island, they organize the defenses, and under their master, Jean Valette, they are going to face one of the first great imperial contests for the Mediterranean, which of course is going to be the Siege of Malta. The knights themselves were not above a great deal of piracy, and in the end they irritated Suleiman so much that he decided he was going to come and wipe them out. So he carries out a long-distance raid, 20,000 men, land on Malta, and take over the island. This is, Slima, as it is now, was not inhabited. The knights occupied these two little peninsulas of Burgos and Sengler, which they decided to defend to the last man. We have fantastic contemporary pictures, both in prints and in paintings and in the Grand Master's palace. They give a very compacted sense of the ferocity of this contest. Burgos and Sengler were the points that they defended, both from land and sea. And these pictures give you a sense of the ferocity of the contest. There are only 500 knights. Actually, a great deal of the fighting was done by the Maltese. But this is war to the knife. This is going to go down to the last man. For 3 months, they battle it out in what eventually turns out to be trench warfare. A vast number of the Ottomans die in the proceeds. The knights are almost whittled down to nothing, but they will not give up, and the Maltese stand with them till the last man. Eventually, autumn comes, and the Ottomans have to withdraw. That's La Valette there, a wonderful piece of target practice, I think, with his Red Cross. Having realized that actually they gave away a strategic own goal by leaving the peninsula unguarded, they then come to build the model city of Valletta, which is both in this grid pattern, which is going to be a massively defended military fort and sort of like the ideal town of the 16th century, as seen from the air. And it's sort of perfect, really, sort of untouched now in its narrow streets, its long vistas, and its absolute silence at night. So the knights really, and they also surround this with massive fortifications. Some of it built by slave labor. They enslaved a lot of Muslim slaves. Some of it built by free labor from Malta and from probably from Sicily. And these are formidable defenses. They construct some of the show buildings of the island, the Grand Master's Palace, with its marble corridors and many memorials of the knights. They build extraordinary lodging houses for themselves, the Auberge of Castile, which is now the Prime Minister's office. They build the co-cathedral of St. John, with one of the great works of art of European history by Caravaggio. Caravaggio came, did some painting, disgraced himself, got into a fight, got put into prison, escaped and ran away, but not before he'd created this painting. They also carry out very effective anti-pirate measures. A lot of the coast of Malta on the beachable side is ringed with these forts as kind of lookouts against the piracy. And actually they drag Malta more into the mainstream of European trade. In the 18th century, the knights sort of slowly drift. Their role really deteriorates. They no longer have a role. They get into theatre, and they build a very nice theatre. But they're becoming decadent, really. And they're ripe for plucking for the next great game of Mediterranean history, which is, of course, going to be between the French and the British for control of the Mediterranean. Napoleon spots the strategic advantage of Malta, and he pitches up with a very large army, steps ashore, the knights meekly surrender and go off into obscurity. Napoleon stays 6 days and then fortifies it. Unfortunately, the French, who are horribly secular, into liberty, fraternity, and ransacking Maltese churches, are very quickly very unpopular. And the Maltese rise up and massacre the garrison in Medina. Here are the same characters again, now dressed as Maltese partisans. Some of them pay the price. I'm afraid they're in front of a French firing squad at this point. But they cannot, the French retreat into Valletta. The Maltese cannot winkle them out. The fortifications are too massive for this to be done. And eventually, this is potentially Malta's moment of potential of independence, but they have to call in the British. Nelson creates a total blockade of the island. Napoleon's rather given to a bit of elaboration of the importance of Malta to French geostrategic interests by suggesting that he'd rather have the British in Montmartre. But eventually, the British oust them. And at this point, of course, Malta gets dragged into the British sphere of influence. It becomes a hub along with Gibraltar, Malta, Cyprus, and then when the Suez Canal is built, a hub of British naval sea power. This is a critical moment for Malta, really. It breaks the link with Sicily, and it's going to it's going to give Malta, I think, if nothing else, one gift, which is going to be the English language, which is going to be incredibly valuable to it, certainly in the century which we are now. There's an awful lot of British imperial architecture still lying around. I'm still surprised that Queen Victoria is allowed to exist in Republic Square, but we're very grateful that she's survived. And it shows a great magnanimity on the part of the Maltese that this is so. It becomes a hub of British naval sea power. The British create a great amount of work for Maltese in terms of dockyard work and support and supplies and so on. Towards the end of the 19th century, the British get a bit scared about the arms race, and so they add another layer of fortifications to Malta, which is they build their own Maginot Line, the Victoria lines along the north of Malta. Probably completely useless, but it made them feel better. They're also extremely worried that the Italians are starting to build very big battleships. So they construct their own extra state-of-the-art fort at the mouth of the Grand Canal, sorry, I've been thinking about Venice, the Grand Harbour, and sort of state-of-the-art gun emplacement called Fort Ranella, again being fired in replica, I hope, which is a 100-ton gun, completely useless really because they only fire in one direction, I think, but it shows the kind of the gathering of an arms race at the end of the 19th century. Here are the same people again pretending to be British Tommies in about 1900. They must have a great wide range of uniforms. In the First World War, Malta becomes the back station, if you like, and the hospital recuperation place for Gallipoli campaign, for resourcing of the very misguided adventure that the British took into Iraq, and is probably full of troops and ships, so this brings us really into the 20th century. The Maltese like to kind of, I'm sure we've all seen this, the firing of the noonday gun, which was a kind of British tradition. It's a great tourist show every day at 12 o'clock, is another memorial of the British. There is one great contest to come, of course, which is going to be the Second World War. And I am not going to talk about that. I'm going to shut up there. I hope I've done this in under 20 minutes. Thank you very much.